But why crime fiction?
Well,
You know, how do you get there from that story?
yeah, that's a good question. I heard the story in the 80s. I went back in the 90s. My son was young at the time, and we'd stayed in France, and we had a few nights in Paris. And when we were there, that whole story came back to me. And it had never gone away, but I thought, how can I tell this story? And I couldn't write literary fiction. I mean, clueless. But maybe, I was reading a lot of P.D. James, which my dad had turned me on to.
Sure.
One of your favorites.
And my absolute favorites, yes.
Well, I hadn't read mystery since Nancy Drew Under the Covers with a Flashlight,
Yeah.
But my dad was going like, well, there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. And I'm like, yeah. But yeah, the psychological depth, and you tell so much more. So I was thinking, well, maybe I could, write the story, write about it, and frame it, use the detective novel as a framework, a structure to tell the story. So voila, that's what happened.
What's the name of the first novel you wrote in that series?
Murder in the Marais.
Murder in the Marais.
And that was based on my friend's mother, fictionally based.
I'm just wondering for viewers who might not be familiar with your work, if you could talk a little bit about Amy, and about the conceit at the heart of your series in terms of the locations.
Right.
Sure. Well, I couldn't write as a French woman. I still can't. But I thought Amy could be half French and half American, taller and thinner than I am, and, wears heels. And she would run a detective agency and do computer security, which in the 90s, when I was starting to write this, was really, cutting edge and very new. So she would inherit this based on a real detective agency, Duluc Detective on Rue du Louvre, who I met and interviewed. She would run this agency, inherited from her father, and solve computer crime, as her daily job, but be pulled into criminal, because she does have a criminal background. She was a PI. And what really spoke to me were the different districts of Paris, the arrondissements, because Paris is a collection of villages, and they each have a unique flavor and ambiance, and that's what I wanted to capture, which I tried in the Marais. Because
And you do so well. I mean, I
thank you.
think some of the best part of your books are the sense of place.
Thank you.
The smells and and visually, I love your writing.
Thank you.
Since you're writing this series based almost exclusively on these individual divisions of Paris, so what are you going to do when you run out of,
Are you
you've
going to
gone
do
through
20?
all of Paris?
Well, there are 20. I've
And
only
then-
done 10.
And then, so you're going to do 10 more?
I know, but
I may.
I mean, is it like Sue Grafton, you're going to do 8?
I may, yeah. The next one is done, number 11, Murder in Passy. We go to the 16th arrondissement, and I'm working on the next. But I may take a what do you call it, the cleansing of the palate,
Yes.
as Ken asked me last night, and maybe play around with the historical, historical fiction.
I
and
read
go
something
back.
about that it would be set in World War II? World War I?
It would be if I write it.
If you ever get to it.
There you
Yes.
go.
I mean,
Yes.
yes, understand that. Tell us a little bit about Amy.
Well, she's got a penchant for bad boys and vintage couture. And because I have a friend who just has this gene, and she can be at a flea market and find in a bin some, bit torn Balenciaga jacket for nothing, So Amy has this capability, which I think is wonderful. And but she's also a vulnerable person. She's half American. Her American mother left them when she was 8 years old, and was a radical, political radical. Sort of with the '70s gangs at that time, the '70s. Remember Bader Meinhof, the German,
Oh, yeah.
kind of like our weathermen, so not exactly,
Right.
but all that, and left. And so there's a whole secret and a whole story about that. Is her mother alive? Why hasn't her mother contacted her? Why wouldn't her father talk about her? And that's always kind of
Will she ever find her mother?
Good question, Ellen.
And you're not going to answer it, are you?
She has 20 books to
Yes,
play
right,
that out
right.
in.
Yeah.
how much does this character talk to you, or any of your characters? Talk a little bit about your process, I guess, is really what I'm saying.
My process. Well, to get to your first point, if I sit Amy and her godfather, Commissaire Morbier, down at a table, and I have to say, when I write him, I think of the French actor Philippe Noiret. Great character actor, you've seen him in Il Postino. He's a big bear of a guy, jowly, more bags under his eyes than me. He's always got like this grease stain on his lapel, a real big kind of mech kind of. And I see him, and then I put him and Amy at a table in a bistro or at a cafe, and they start talking, you know, and there's a lot going on because they each have different agendas. So often that will help me find out what the conflict is and what he wants her to do and what she wants to get from him that he, of course, will never give her. But for me, I've been learning about Amy in the first 10 books. You know, I never intended to write a series. I had no clue. I sold Murder in the Marais to Soho, and then they said, well, where's Amy going next? I said, what?
You said.
I said,
Deer in the headlights.
yeah, they said, well, where is she going in Paris? And who is she? What about that man she was seeing? And I'm saying, yes. And my editor said, well, you are writing a series, aren't you? And I went, of course.
Yes, sure.
But she was feeding me ideas, which was great.
Do you know the story in its entirety before you begin to write it, or do you discover much of it as you go along?
I discover much.
As some of our
And
my
organic
cohorts here
writer,
do.
as somebody
Yeah.
called it the other day.
Yeah.
As long as we're talking about what Amy likes in Paris, one of the things I asked you to do in preparation for this interview was to send us one of your favorite pictures of Paris. And while we can't see it, they'll put it up on the screen. You have to describe it and tell us. Do you remember what that is? I thought you probably would. And would you tell us about where that is and why it's one of your favorite pictures?
Well,
Scenes of Paris?
it's on the river. It's on the Seine. It's nighttime, twilight. It's getting dark, and it's dark. The lights are shining on the Seine, you know, and there's the jutting part of the island where Amy lives, Ile Saint-Louis, and I don't know. It feels very evocative, very Parisian, and it's the view that she has from her window. What could be better, right?
So that's in essence a view from Amy's
Window.
apartment window. huh?
And you said once somewhere that
Great
that's where you
picture,
would
by
like
the way.
to live.
When I win the lottery, yes.
When you win the lottery, yes.
Or get a big movie deal. Or
Many big movie deals. Yes,
That
it's
would
that
be-
kind of a place. Yeah.
Well, one or two. Leave some for the rest of us.
Could you talk about your research, the research that you do, how you go about doing that for each of the books?
I climb in the sewers. I go to the top in the attics. It's the best part of my job because I have to go to Paris. But I talk to police, detectives, cafe owners, bus drivers, anyone who will talk to me, really.
And will they talk to you?
Yeah, now they'll talk to me. You know, it takes a little bit of time. Actually, where I stay with my friend in Paris, in Montmartre, I sleep on her couch, but there's a cafe at the end of down the hill. I've gone in there for 7 years. Now he'll talk to me, use my first name. 7 years, you know,
Okay.
but I've been working it.
Caution.
No Minnesota nice, with just a yeah.
It's those Parisians, but once they talk to you, you are their friend. I mean, it's very strong. So, but then I'll say, you know, tell me about the district, or I have a friend who's a retired brigade criminal inspector, which is effectively homicide, and I'll take him out to a cafe, and at like a table like this, we'll buy a bottle of wine, and I start pouring, and he starts talking, and I just keep pouring, and he keeps talking. So.
Okay.
For Murder in the Latin Quarter, the underground passages, and that's real?
They exist, yes. The limestone, you know, Paris is kind of built on limestone, and it's all kind of honeycombed and webbed. And just to digress for a moment, you know, Montmartre with the Sacré-Cœur on top, they tunneled under the hill of Montmartre, and they quarried all the limestone and built Sacré-Cœur with that limestone of Montmartre. But it's very shaky foundations now, which people don't remember. But yes, and there was this underground, they're a cinema club. They're kind of like, what would you call them, a renegade cinema club. And they went underground, and they used part of this old limestone quarry, and they made a film club with a bar. It's like the Flintstones. You know, you've got this bar carved out.
Right.
And we actually got down. It had been closed, and now it's kind of, but they would have film club, you know, film screenings Friday nights, a big bar, people would party. And I've been there. It's
Amazing.
incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you're not doing violence to the city. You're using the city as it exists as a real place for your.
Well, a
unlike cities.
grittier. It's I mean, it's not a touristy.
Right, but but the tourist Paris is real also.
Is real, but
So
you're taking us places that tourists
tourists.
don't go.
It's not the beret and baguette stereotype.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the places that I go to, my friends tell me about, or when I get lost, you know, I wander down another street and then it's really great. And I go, I've never been here before. Why does this man have this shop here? And, you know, what does this mean? And that's what I love, you know. There's these pockets, you know.
You had some trouble finding your way to our studio this morning. Do you not get so lost in Paris?
Yes, Kent. Well, Kent, you know me so well, and I bow to your directional expertise so much. I am directionally impaired. But Paris, you know, I like getting lost. If I don't have an agenda and I get lost, you know, or if I have an agenda and I get lost and I go in a totally different direction, it's okay.